I'd like to say thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Go to squarespace.com/polyphonic for 10% off your new website. Lou Reed is one of the most important musical figures of the 20th century. From helping create punk style to being a mover and shaker in glam rock to creating some of the earliest noise music, Reed was always pushing boundaries and defying convention. Probably because of this experimentation, Reed never really broke through the mainstream, except for one song, Walk on the Wild Side. Now considered a rock classic, Walk on the Wild Side is actually an incredibly subversive song that tells the stories of some of the most interesting people of an era. Let's take a closer look. Walk on the Wild Side was originally inspired by Nelson Algren's novel of the same name, which tells the story of downtrodden people in 1930s New Orleans. Originally, Lou Reed had set out to create a musical adaptation of the novel, but that fell apart. As he worked on the song, Reed started to populate it not with characters from the book, but with people in his own life. And so the song structure came together. 5 different people, each of whom gets 6 lines in the song. Before getting into these personalities, we should look at the link they all shared: Andy Warhol's Factory. Andy Warhol was a legendary artist who created a number of Warhol superstars, personalities who would be muses for his arts and part of his public clique. Many of these superstars were helping legitimize new definitions of gender and sexuality. And Warhol also managed and worked with the Velvet Underground for a period, so Reed bumped elbows with lots of Warhol superstars. That's where we get back to Walk on the Wild Side.
Holly came from Miami, FLA, hitchhiked her way across USA, plucked her eyebrows on the way, shaved her legs, and then he was a
The first verse of the song is about Holly Woodlawn, who, as you might expect from the lyrics, came from Miami, Florida. Woodlawn was a transgender woman who fled her home to New York after being discriminated upon for her gender identity. After turning tricks on the street to make ends meet as a teenager, she was found by Andy Warhol, who started to put her in his films. Warhol put her in the Paul Morrissey film Trash, where she thrived, and then she went on to appear in Warhol and Morrissey's Woman in Revolt, as well as a few other acting pieces. Woodlawn is an important figure in LGBT history, and thanks to Lou Reed, in music history too. In an interview with the New York Times, she acknowledged her place in Reed's song, saying, "Lou Reed made me immortal." The second person we meet is another transgender icon, Candy Darling.
Candy came from out on the island. In the back room she was everybody's darling, but she never lost her head. Even when she was given head, she says, "Hey babe, take a walk on the wild side."
Darling starred in Warhol's Flesh and appeared alongside Woodlawn in Woman in Revolt, and she was a muse for Lou Reed, who also wrote about her in Candy Says. The Kinks' Lola may also be about Candy Darling, and the Rolling Stones even talk about her on their 1967 track, Citadel. Unfortunately, Darling's career was short-lived as she died of lymphoma at just 29 years old. In the years since her death, Candy has become a legendary figure in queer communities, thanks in no small part to Lou Reed putting her into songs. After the first chorus, we're introduced to Little Joe, better known as Joe D'Alessandro.
Little Joe never once gave it away. Everybody had to pay and pay. A hustle here and a hustle there. New York City is the place where they said, "Hey babe."
D'Alessandro was a star in both Flesh and Trash, and unlike the rest of the people in the song, he actually went on to break the mainstream. After his career with Warhol, he would appear in movies like The Cotton Club, Critical Condition, and The Limey. Like Darling, D'Alessandro has a few other neat musical connections. The famous crotch on the cover of the Rolling Stones' Sticky Fingers? Yep, that's him, and so is the topless torso on the front of the Smiths' debut record. But the Little Joe that Lou Reed sings about in this song isn't actually that much like D'Alessandro in real life. Instead, it's based more on the character that he played in Flesh. The next character we meet is Sugar Plum Fairy, who was Joe Campbell. He played a character by that name in Warhol's film, My Hustler.
Sugar Plum Fairy came and hit the streets. looking for soul food and a place to eat. Went to the Apollo, you should have seen him go, go, go. They said, hey, sugar, take a walk on the wild.
Warhol isn't the only famous association of Joe Campbell's. Throughout the late 1950s and early 1960s, Campbell was in a 7-year relationship with Harvey Milk, the first openly gay elected official in Californian history and a massive figure in the history of gay rights. And that brings us to our last character, Jackie Curtis.
Jackie is just speeding away. Thought she was James Dean for a day. Then I guess she had to crash. Valium would have helped that patch. She said, hey babe, take a walk on
Curtis was another Warhol superstar and a drag performer. She appeared alongside other actresses in this song, having parts in Flesh and Woman in Revolt. And her drag style typically featured glitter, bright hair, and torn clothing, which is a look that some people have credited as inspiring the 1970s glam rock aesthetic. Curtis famously had an obsession with James Dean, something reflected in the song, as well as a proclivity for drugs and partying. That tendency would end up bringing her to a young death at 38 years old from a heroin overdose. After Curtis's story, the song fades out. Walk on the Wild Side gives us a great little glimpse into a historical scene, and it helps us understand the people around Lou Reed that influenced the great artist that he was. I'd like to thank Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform where you can use designer templates to build your own website. Whether it's a new business, a creative pursuit, or a personal portfolio, Squarespace can help you build your website to your vision. They've got award-winning 24/7 customer service, online store capabilities, and simple domain hosting and transferring. I'm a big fan of Squarespace, and I've actually used them to build my personal portfolio site, so I can promise you it's a really fun, intuitive platform. So head on over to squarespace.com/polyphonic to show them that I sent you. With that code, you'll save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Think it, dream it, make it with Squarespace.